Disney's live-action remake of Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, is in for a rude awakening this weekend. It's now staring at what I think is going to be about a $200 million loss based on an atrocious opening, even going beneath the already low expectations coming into the opening weekend. Well, let's check in with Rachel Zegler now and see what she has to say.
To everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Ooh, good luck with that. You know what they say, you can wish in one hand and crap in the other and see which one you fill first. I have a feeling Rachel knows which one that is now. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker around on the social medias. And of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. And make sure to join us every Sunday and Wednesday afternoon right here at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show. We'll have a great one for you this evening. Make sure you're there for it. After all the pomp and circumstance, or at least the lack thereof, if you look at Disney's red carpet premiere for Snow White just a week ago, where, remember, no actual real media was invited to be on the red carpet and ask the stars of the new movie any serious questions. You know, this movie that cost Disney somewhere roughly around $400 million to make before they got any film tax credits back. Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. And this is why Disney is probably looking at a staggering loss on this film, one of the biggest they've ever had, perhaps approaching that of things like the Eternals and even the Marvels. But this from Anthony DeAlessandro this morning on Deadline magazine. Ho hum, ho hum. Snow White opens to $43 million. What poisoned this princess at the box office? Disney's Snow White is coming in lighter for the weekend with $43 million domestic and an $87.3 million global start. Now, what is absolutely terrifying about that is nearly 15% lower than what Deadline had already projected to be a low opening weekend just a few days ago. As a matter of fact, you probably saw us covering an article from Deadline in the last couple of days saying that they still thought that the $50 million to $55 million domestic opening weekend was still in the cards, with maybe about another $50 million or so overseas. That is not happening now. It looks like both domestic and international box offices are going to be coming in around $45 million apiece or less. And the fact of the matter is, when you already started out with that low of a projection, and those projections have been steadily declining over the last few weeks, even the box office projection right now on Sunday may still turn out to be a touch high. It's not a happy ending for this $270 million production, which was impacted by the actors' strike, a COVID breakout, a set fire, and more. Now, again, to remind folks, that $270 million figure is one that was reported by our friend Caroline Reed at Forbes magazine just several months ago, because Disney had filed its most recent financial return for the production entity that was responsible for doing Snow White on Disney's behalf. Now, those production entities have to report all of their expenses to the UK in order to receive those UK film tax credits, usually somewhere around 20 to 25%, depending on what kind of expenses are qualified versus those that aren't. But the key factor is, and the reason that this $270 million figure is wrong, is something that Caroline points out in her own article, but nobody ever seems to pay attention to the details. She correctly shows us that is only the financial reporting for Snow White's production through December 31st of 2023. That's right. That $270 million figure does not include any production expenses that would have occurred either reshooting the movie, which they seem to have clearly done large portions of, rescripting the movie, or whole new loads of post-production, editing, color grading, or visual effects. Anything that took place in the last 15 months has yet to be reported by Disney. It's probably going to get reported here in the next 6 to 12 months, and we'll update you. And that is why that figure of $270 million is very easily expected, in my opinion, to hit somewhere close to $400 million. And of course, there will be some film tax credits to take back. So maybe Disney's net cost of production on this is somewhere around $320 million, is where my mind is at this point. And that still doesn't include at least $100 million in global marketing. This is an over $400 million all-in endeavor, even with film tax credits. And even without the film tax credits, we're still talking about roughly $500 million when you consider total expenses between production and marketing. They say there's no such thing as bad publicity, D'Alessandro continues, but clearly in the case of Snow White, there was. Disney has been put through the ringer before on controversial theatrical releases like Solo, a Star Wars story, and a swapping of directors from Lord and Miller to Ron Howard, which deep-sixed that movie to a very less than $1 billion global take of $393 million worldwide. Matter of fact, that's probably about where Snow White is going to land, I would suspect, at this point, given its opening. Now, of course, the story also fails to mention that one of the biggest controversies around Solo was The Last Jedi, which came out just a few months before Solo did. And Disney and Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy having the temerity to do what they did to Luke Skywalker, insult him and insult the fans repeatedly throughout that movie. That is what really put Solo under the gun and caused it to have a massive box office collapse. That more than anything. Anthony also says this is why Disney muzzles talent on slipping any kind of information on a movie months in advance, particularly on Star Wars and Marvel films. The concern is that if it starts to tease too much or go off of book, it will trigger a gong around the world with an avalanche to follow for what is being primed as a tentpole with hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. Exhibit A, proof of that Snow White was doomed when Disney pushed the picture's release back one entire year. The pick originally was scheduled to hit marquees on March 22nd, 2024. Reminding folks that Disney did not just sit on their hands for an entire year of the delay. They didn't delay it because of the actors and writers strike, as they stated. That strike ended just a few weeks after Disney made the call. They could have rescinded. They were still 5 to 6 months away from the release of that picture. If it was truly finished at that point, if the movie that was set to come out a year ago had already been in the can and been the same movie that we saw this past weekend, then why the year delay? You didn't have to do it. You would have had the actors available to do all the press junkets long before the movie came out, considering when the actors and writers strike finally ended. No, Disney pushed it back a year, using that as an excuse so they could go back and retool the entire movie, because by that point, everybody was starting to see, thanks to leaks in places like the UK Daily Mail, what an absolute clown show this movie was. In fact, I just did a little bit on this one a few days ago. I'll show you the YouTube video right now. It's only a minute, but I promise you it's probably one of the most succinct reviews of this film you will see. Disney's Snow White live-action remake starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot doesn't even look like it's going to make its $50 million minimum threshold that was projected just a few days ago. No, now it's down, according to Deadline magazine, one of the most reliable sources out there, as probably landing somewhere in the mid-40s. The mid-40s. This is a travesty for Disney shareholders, and Disney has nobody but itself to blame. Maybe it was because of the terrible writing, the terrible directing, frankly, the terrible acting based on the terrible writing and terrible directing, and the god-awful, low-rent, modern Broadway slop that they've thrown in here like this.
Well, that sounds an awful lot like Princess Problems. Finally learning that life's not fair.
Princess Problems sounds like it was something written by a really drunk Randy Newman. It's a bad Randy Newman song if Randy Newman was clinically f***ing retarded. Well, that sounds an awful lot like Princess Problem. Oh, we're complaining that life's not fair. Enjoy the $200 million loss on this one, Disney. You earned it. So this is what we're looking at right now, kids. It is abysmal. And even if this movie is fortunate enough somehow to leg out at a 6.9, or let's call it a 7 for math's sake, like Mufasa the Lion King did, well, then this movie is still going to struggle to get its way up to even $500 million. $500 million would be an extreme ceiling in that case. And don't forget one other thing about Mufasa that we continue to remind folks of, and that is the gargantuanly outsized performance in international markets for Mufasa that got it to $700 million. The domestic box office represented a little bit more than a third of the total haul. But that is clearly not the case as of right now for Snow White, where the international box office and domestic box office are basically on par. And we've also been telling you for months that there was almost no way that Rachel Zegler's Snow White was going to be able to beat even The Little Mermaid from 2023, because The Little Mermaid is still a much more popular Disney princess in the modern era than Snow White ever has been. As of right now, Snow White is going to be lucky to make it to the $400 million global box office mark. It's basically in the same boat as Captain America Brave New World, which is being left in theaters right now just to see if Disney can get the domestic box office to cross over 200 million. They're at about 190 today. Maybe if it sits there another month and a half, it might make it, but at this point, it may well not. Little Mermaid was something that was another travesty for Disney, losing them at least $100 to $150 million based on that global box office and how much money they spent to make it and then market it into theaters. Snow White, quite frankly, by all accounts, is going to be even worse, coming in with a lower box office and a higher total end cost to Disney to produce and market. This is something that Disney shareholders should be absolutely pissed off about. And again, I think this is one of the big reasons that Disney decided to move the annual shareholder meeting for the company up 2 weeks compared to the last couple of years when they did it in early April, because they wanted to avoid the public humiliation that they had to have known was coming with Snow White. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you join us today at 6 p.m. Eastern, Sunday, March 23rd, for the live show where we will cover this in much more detail, and I'll give you even more thoughts about where I think this is going moving forward. Take care.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.